Live, Formula One.
Good afternoon, welcome back to live coverage of Sprint Saturday here in Austria. The Red Bull Ring is the location for the 9th race of the F1 calendar and the second of 6 sprint races in this 2023 season. It's grey, it is raining, it's misty, the clouds are covering the grassy mountaintops of the Styrian Alpine region that surrounds this undulating circuit here in Spielberg, which is about an hour or so from Graz. But the conditions could be exactly what the doctor ordered for the first bit of racing action of the weekend, the 100-kilometre dash or 30-minute sprint race at 24 laps, which Max Verstappen secured pole for earlier this afternoon. Here's how the championship lines up ahead of this first bit of racing action. It is Verstappen who leads, a whopping 69-point gap at the top to his teammate Sergio Perez. Alonso 9 points behind the Mexican in third. Over in the constructors, well, Red Bull have won every single race so far and have amassed a 154-point lead over Mercedes, and 13 points between Mercedes and Aston Martin in the battle for second and third, with Ferrari not too far behind either. Joining me to guide you through all of the coverage this afternoon is the former Williams driver Jack Aiken. And Jack, actually, before we get into all the racing action, a bit of sad news to bring you in the world of motorsport. As a young driver racing in the Formula Regional Championship at Spa this weekend, a championship young racers take part in on the road up the junior ladder to F1. Delano van der Hoff, just 18 years old, involved in an incident and has sadly passed away. And unfortunately, Jack, this isn't the first time we've seen such a tragic incident in motorsport, or indeed at Spa.
No, it's always going to be a part of our sport, sadly, and it's tragic to lose someone so young. And it sounds as though there was a multi-car incident at the Camel Straight in Spa. We know it's a track that presents a lot of challenges. Visibility was not great, and wet weather not helping the situation, and there was a situation where a car was stopped on the straight and struck. So it's very sad. Our thoughts obviously with Delano's family, friends, all of the drivers and staff in that paddock. We know it's going to be a very, very hard time for them.
Absolutely, and tributes have been pouring out, not just from across the world of motorsport, but from across the world of Formula One as well. And echoing what Jack says there, all of our thoughts with everybody who has been affected by that. But as all racers want to do, they want to go racing, and that is exactly what we are about to get set for here for the sprint, the second of the season. Let's take you through how the grid lines up. Max Verstappen starts at the front alongside Sergio Perez, who was actually his best start in any kind of race since Miami 4 races ago. Lando Norris in the upgraded McLaren goes from third in front of Nico Hülkenberg, which will be 3 top 7 starts in the last 3 races. So good work from the Haas driver there, and Carlos Sainz, who was battling brake issues in qualifying, managed to get a top 5 in the end in front of Fernando Alonso and Lance Stroll. And the second Aston Martin goes from 7th, improved form from the Canadian. Ocon is 8th, Charles Leclerc 9th after a 3-place grid penalty for impeding Oscar Piastri in qualifying. Kevin Magnussen in the other Haas rounds out the top 10. Alex Albon 11th in front of a frustrated Pierre Gasly in the Alpine. Yuki Tsunoda 13th for AlphaTauri in front of his teammate Nick De Vries. George Russell, hydraulic issues in qualifying saw him stuck in the garage. 15th was all he could muster. Zhou Guanyu behind him in the Alfa Romeo was 16th in front of the other McLaren of Oscar Piastri. The big hitter to fall out of the first part of qualifying, Lewis Hamilton, with a lap time deleted, didn't have enough time to get another one in. 18th is where he will start this race in front of his old teammate Valtteri Bottas in 19th in the Alfa Romeo. And Logan Sargent, with pressure mounting on the American, starts from 20th and last. Now, DRS has been deactivated. It is raining. The track has been declared wet, and pretty much, Jack, everybody is on intermediates.
Pretty much everyone. On our tracker it says that Bottas is on mediums, but I can't quite believe that must be a mistake.
Either that is an error on our screen.
I think it must be a mistake. We're going to get visual confirmation soon, but it is wet out there. It's wet, as they would say.
It is wet. And the tyre blankets have just been removed off of all of the drivers' cars. They roll back slightly in their grid boxes so they can lay a little bit of rubber down, and you're absolutely right. Now the tyres warmers have been removed. Bottas in the Alfa Romeo down in 19th, gambling on a set of medium compound tyres. BBC's chief F1 writer Andrew Benson is also in the box with us.
So I'm thinking Valtteri Bottas is just thinking, I'm 19th on the grid, what the hell, let's throw the dice and see what happens. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's still raining out there. It just doesn't make sense. The only thing I can think of is if he's going to crawl around the first corner and just hope for a safety car or some other incident where perhaps it would start to dry out during that safety car period and he'd save a pit stop. I don't know.
Well, he's got a mullet and a moustache. He's gone full Aussie, hasn't he, on this one?
We're just seeing him pull away from his grid spot now. I mean, even getting around this formation lap's going to be tricky because, absolutely right, Jack, it's not like the rain has stopped. It is still falling fairly heavily. He gets away, but it's at a cruel pace. Of course, getting any kind of heat into those tyres is going to be near on impossible.
It's going to be a disaster. I mean, to put it into perspective, these cars are so finely tuned to work in a narrow operating window. When you give them a tyre that is not giving you the grip that you need, you can't put any load through the car. It feels horrible. You don't get any feedback from the steering wheel. And it is actually going to be an achievement for him to just get around this formation lap. It's still raining hard out there. There's proper rooster tails from these cars. I'm staggered by that.
Well, it's going to make for an interesting start. We'll certainly keep an eye on what is happening at the rear of the field to see how Bottas gets on. But it's a short lap here. It's 4.3 kilometres, 2.6 miles, 10 turns. Really only 7 or 8 of them are taken as full corners in these Formula One cars. But even on the formation lap, Jack, some of the drivers are struggling out there, particularly Sergio Perez.
It's track limits. Wide at turn 3. Yeah, he had a bit of a lock-up on the left front tyre just as he was coming up to... I'm sure he was just trying to get some temperature in him. Yeah, it looks like it's that horrible kind of greasy sort of surface at the moment where you've had enough rubber going down over the weekend to get those oils coming back to the surface, and it's not heavy enough rain to wash it away completely.
Well, top 8 all score points in this sprint. It's 8 points for the win, and shock, Valtteri Bottas on this formation lap has just been told to box. That means he's going to come into the pits at the end of this formation lap, and I would imagine change to the intermediate tyre and then start from the end of the pit lane.
Is this a ploy to get fresh, hot intermediates when others will be sitting on the grid losing temperature? That could be it, because I know the strategist at Alfa Romeo, and they are no slouch. Yeah, she knows what she's doing, so maybe this is a sneaky call, eh?
Quite possibly. This is the sound of Lewis Hamilton just crawling around the final corner now. There's quite a big gap between Hamilton and the car in front of him, which is Oscar Piastri. Verstappen all well and truly in his grid spot approaching, just waiting for Logan Sargent to come around the final corner as Bottas peels into the pits to change to the intermediate tyre. So on the back row of the grid then it will just be Logan Sargent with a gap before you get to Hamilton and Piastri. On the front row of the grid at the Red Bull ring, it's 2 Red Bulls. It's Sergio Perez on the left-hand side. Max Verstappen starts from pole position in the second sprint race of the season. It's all eyes to the lights and foot to the floor as we go racing for the sprint here in Austria. It's a wet start and it's a decent start for Sergio Perez in second, who muscles his way down the inside of Max Verstappen. He manages to keep it plugged into turn 1. Verstappen is coming back at him though. The 2 Red Bulls going side by side in the run down to 2, and it's Perez who manages to see Verstappen off. Verstappen dipping a toe onto the grass but keeps it clean. Verstappen into 3, launching it down the inside of Perez, can't get it stopped in time, forces Perez off the track. It all bunches up behind them, cars going left, right and centre, and in the end it's Nico Hülkenberg who gets up into 3rd behind the 2 Red Bulls, who are still battling side by side. This time they're once again nearly forcing each other off the track, and it's Hülkenberg down the inside of a Perez. I think it's Perez in the second Red Bull now, who is making his way up into second. Verstappen leads. Hülkenberg round the outside of Perez, who gets a huge slide on the rear end of that Red Bull as we now go into the left-hander of 7. What a start to this sprint.
Catch your breath, Harry. My God, that was the Red Bulls going absolutely nail and tongue at each other. There was nothing held back there. Verstappen was on the grass coming out of turn 1 trying to pass Perez, and Perez gave him not a single inch, and he returned the favour by chucking it up the inside of turn 3. got a little bit of a wiggle into the apex and just showed him the door basically on the exit.
No holds barred between the two Red Bull drivers, but what that has been is a fantastic start for the Haas of Nico Hülkenberg, who is up into second spot. Action with the second of the Haas's, though, further back. Kevin Magnussen started in the top 10, now down to 11, and only, I think, Lando Norris in the other McLaren is in front of him, and that means Norris has fallen all the way down from his magnificent starting position of third. So it's been a poor start for Norris. Let's run you through how it goes at the moment as we are halfway through now, lap 2 of 24. Verstappen leads Hülkenberg and Perez. Sainz is fourth. Then it's the two Aston Martins of Stroll, Alonso, Albon, Ocon, Leclerc, Norris the top 10. The two Mercedes cutting their way through the field. Russell just getting in front of Kevin Magnussen up into 11th. Lewis Hamilton's made a good start. He's behind the Haas and trying to follow his teammate through. Hamilton in 13th, Tsunoda behind 14th, Gasly the top 15, De Vries, Piastri, Zhou, Sargent and Bottas the top 20.
Russell and Hamilton both making decent progress now. Russell 11th, Hamilton 13th, up from their starting positions of 15th and 18th. So that's no mean feat in these wet conditions. When you're right back in the pack, you can't see anything for the spray, and it's very risky to throw one up the inside, because if you lock a wheel, which is so easy to do, you're just going straight into the side of another car. So they've done well to make up a few positions already.
Yeah, the rain is still coming down hard, so much so that the spray that the cars are giving off on the rear end is creating such a mist as we see down through turn 1. You can't see some of the cars behind. The visibility is severely limited. The grandstands are packed, the cagoules are out, the umbrellas are up, and the racing is absolutely hard fought so far in this sprint race. Lap 3, we were talking about Magnussen fighting the two Mercedes. K-Mag has managed to get back in front of George Russell up into 11th. So good start from Magnussen, or trying to recover, I should say, as we get another look at how the start happened, Jack.
Yeah, so Checo gets a great second phase of his launch, is fully alongside Verstappen, up the inside, finishes the move into the corner, but gets a little bit wide on the curves on the exit of turn 1, loses traction. Max is straight on him up the inside, going through the long kink right-hander into turn 3, but Perez is already moving over and pushes him onto the grass. He gets the position back, but then loses it straight away into turn 3 as Max throws it up the inside, goes all the way to the edge of the track. Lando gets caught up in all of that as well, trying to avoid the battling Red Bulls, and gets shuffled back. Here's Verstappen.
You push me off, man. What the
So he's talking about being pushed off on the straight where you got two wheels on the grass, and of course he just did the same thing to Perez into turn 3, and Lando very unlucky there.
What's wrong with Max, man?
Yeah, so both Red Bulls complaining about each other, and just getting the full replay now on the exit of that corner of turn 3, and Lando lost so many positions because he was so delayed getting back onto the power coming out there.
Trouble in paradise at Red Bull, but yeah, Norris absolutely right. I think he nearly had the undercut on both of them as the two Red Bulls ran wide, but then he himself just got caught out a little bit, lost grip, and then before you knew it, the rest of the pack swarmed him and he didn't have any kind of traction to get off. So Norris has fallen all the way down to 10th at the moment. It's Verstappen who has a 1.8 second lead over Nico Hülkenberg, the man that has never scored a podium in Formula 1. If he gets it in a sprint race, though, there's questions of, does it actually count as a podium? Well, probably no. Sergio Perez is third, Sainz fourth, Stroll fifth, sixth, Alonso. Then it's Albon in seventh in the Williams, Ocon, Leclerc, Norris the top 10, Magnussen, Russell, Hamilton, Tsunoda, Gasly the top 15, De Vries, Piastri, Sargent, and the two Alfa Romeos of Zhou and Valtteri Bottas make up the final two spots. A reminder, it is just the top 8 that score points. 8 points for the winner, all the way down to 1 point for 8th place as we start lap number 5 of 24 for the second of the sprint races in this 2023 season. And this has been an enthralling start to a race, I must say. One of the more interesting starts that we've had so far this year.
Yeah, the effect of the Red Bulls bunching up the pack into turn 3 really put the field into a bit of chaos, because it just had this ripple effect back through the pack, and a few people out of position. We're watching Norris now as he's fighting the car through the last sector and into turn 1. Russell on the radio.
Is there any more rain coming? Just a continuation of this very light rain at the moment.
And that was George Russell being told a continuation of the same level of rain, so it hasn't really eased, but it is still coming down, and the mist being, the spray being kicked up from the rear ends of these Formula One cars, creating a limited visibility, particularly coming down on the main straight and the uphill approach to turn 1. Meanwhile, for the battle for ninth is really brewing, and it's between Charles Leclerc and Esteban Ocon, and Leclerc is going backwards as they approach turn 7. Ocon has managed to get through on the Ferrari. Leclerc struggling out there compared to his teammate.
No, what was going on there was that was Leclerc trying to pass Ocon, and then Ocon got him back into the next corner.
Thank you, Andrew. Apologies for that. Well, either way, compared to his teammate, Carlos Sainz has had a good start. He's up into 4th, and he's got a good gap over his teammates, I should say, the Aston Martin of Lance Stroll, who's currently occupying 5th. And as we're just getting another look there, absolutely right. Esteban Ocon ran a little bit deep coming into turn 4, and that allowed Leclerc up the inside, but then that does become the outside for the next corner.
Yeah, he came from a long way back. It must have been a good 50, 70 metres that he came back from into turn 4. But that's one of the beauties of racing in these kind of conditions. You can have so many different lines, as we see that playing out in turn 3. Ocon and Leclerc battling on the inside, taking the apex curve as you would in the dry. Lando, who we know is great in the wet, going all the way around the outside, just searching for a cleaner part of the track that isn't contaminated by the oils that come up from the rubber-stained portion of tarmac that is normally the racing line. On board with Leclerc, and he's really struggling with traction, and that's allowed Norris to get alongside, going around the outside into turn 6, and Leclerc just shows him the door.
Yeah, Norris trying to recover from his unfortunate start, had the pace but got bunched up because the two Red Bulls were looking at each other, and now this is the sound on board. Norris, who scored his first podium in Formula One at this very track, looking to the inside of turn 9, but nowhere near close enough at the moment. All over the back though of the Ferrari in front of him, round the final corner, up through the gears. How's the spray looking at the moment? It has eased slightly, it's not as bad, but Norris does move all the way to the right-hand side on the main straight to try and get out of the behind of Leclerc, to try and find a little bit of visibility. Through turn 1 they go, and it is still Leclerc in 9th, Norris 10th.
Just a general update. The field has settled down a little bit now. We're not getting as many position changes as we had in the opening lap, so Hulkenberg has actually pretty much solidified his position in second, and he has a bit of a gap obviously in front of Verstappen, 3.5 seconds now, but he's also got nearly 2 seconds to Perez behind, so it's not like Perez is all over the back of that Haas trying to overtake. And equally, the Mercedes down in 12th and 13th, Russell and Hamilton, they're kind of stalled there. They're not making any further progress.
No, it's Verstappen, 4 seconds over Hulkenberg, who has another second in kind or so over Sergio Perez in 3rd, Sainz 4th, Stroll 5th, Alonso, Albon, Ocon, Leclerc and Norris still battling hard, make up the top 10. Magnussen, Russell, Hamilton, Tsunoda and Gasly the top 15, De Vries, Piastri, Sargent, Zhou and Bottas, who started on the slick tyre, quickly realised that was a mistake and came into the pits.
So can confirm the front left is the limitation at this stage. Rear left looks good.
So now they've managed to get their number 1 goal done, which was get a, well, I say clean start, but retain the lead through the first lap, and he's straight into tyre management mode. These Inters are not going to like it as the track starts to dry up and you lose that standing water, so he's already trying to mitigate against that and just control the lead, and doing a pretty good job from the looks of it.
This is the sound of Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes, currently down in 13th position and looking at the rear of his teammate George Russell in 12th, who is also pretty close to Kevin Magnussen in the Haas, who's holding 11 at the moment. They go into the downhill braking of 4 down through the gears, the gravel trap to your left, so easy to go a little bit deep and find yourself in there. Hamilton keeps it nice and tidy. He's not finding too much time on Russell in front of him, but then manages to close up quite nicely through the next left-hander. Now we go through the left-hander of 7, which then very quickly becomes the right-hander of 8. But in these conditions, it's a lot more tentative, a lot more easy on the throttle. And now, before you know it, you're into the final 2 corners.
You can see that they're both bottled up behind the Haas of Magnussen, and Russell is running quite close behind him, but through this lap hasn't been able to use the toe enough to get alongside him. But he's got a good run out the last corner. He's really tucked in behind the spray, has a look into the first corner but doesn't commit to it. He's trying to get a good exit, and I think he has. Magnussen was wide over the curves on the exit there.
And if there's one driver who's up for a fight, it's usually Kevin Magnussen in the Haas as he bounces along the next straight. The sparks fly. Russell dives down the inside. Can he get his Mercedes nose in front? Yes, he can. Lewis Hamilton behind is trying to follow through, but out of the corner, and it's a drag race to turn 4. It is Russell on the left-hand side and Magnussen on the right-hand side. Magnussen will have the outside line. Russell brakes later. Can he get it turned into the right-hander? Yes, he can. Russell gets through on Magnussen for 11th. Hamilton not close enough to pounce on Magnussen, though. He'll have to do it the next lap around. Magnussen won't give this one up a fight and tries to come back, though, at Russell coming through turn 5. Gets a little bit out of shape, though. Has to bail out and balance that Haas in these tricky conditions.
Meanwhile, up front, Perez is really slashing that gap to Hülkenberg. It's down to 0.6 of a second, half a second. So it looks like he's really making a big push to try and get past the Haas.
Yeah, 0.7 of a second then for the gap between Perez and Hülkenberg. Here's Alonso in 6th.
Do you think the track will dry?
Potentially, yes.
Well, Jack, you were telling me before we came on, there is not a chance this is going to dry out, at least fully.
I don't recall that, Harry, actually. I think it's quite possible. It certainly seemed that way before the start when it was still raining, but there is a slightly drier patch of track appearing as we look at the straight, and we see Hamilton now having a go at Magnussen. He's on the outside going into turn 3. He's going to get the cut back and good traction, and that should be done by the time they get to turn 4. But yeah, it's definitely looking drier, so take my words back.
I didn't mean to drop you under the bus there. Now Magnussen, I thought he might have been resigned to losing that spot, but he's going to try down the inside of 4, the downhill braking point, and he does get back up the inside of Hamilton, but Hamilton has a better run out of the corner, side by side, coming through 5 and into 6. Hamilton on the outside, the left-hander. Hamilton will meet the gravel, but he keeps it nice and tidy through on Magnussen. Nice fight between these two, the former McLaren racers, battling down for 12th and 13th right now, and Hamilton getting through on the Dane. 12th for him, 13th for Magnussen. Nice scrap there. There is also a nice scrap developing for 7th at the moment. Alex Albon in the Williams, just half a second in front of Ocon. Then comes Leclerc, then comes Norris, and they're all coming through turn 1 right now.
And the Mercedes are about to join that battle, aren't they? Because it looks like they've got better pace than this little bunch that are now running up towards turn 3, and you can see some cars are already jumping out to the side of the straight to try and get some of that standing water that hasn't dried up yet. And it looks like Leclerc having a look at Ocon. He couldn't quite get alongside, so they remain as they were.
This is the sound of Sergio Perez in the Red Bull, who has been closing for the last couple of laps on the Haas of Nico Hülkenberg, which currently occupies 2nd spot. Through 6, the left-hander they go. Quite a wide line from Hülkenberg. Perez keeps it nice and tight through the left-hander of 7, and then out through 8. Hülkenberg holding his own for the time being, but that gap has been coming down 10th by 10th over the last couple of laps. Here's our leader, though.
Max, thoughts on conditions?
Cylinders.
So those are Max Verstappen's thoughts. He currently has over an 8.5 second lead up front from Hülkenberg, who is looking in his mirrors because the Mexican racer of Sergio Perez is all over the back of him into turn 1. And I'll tell you what, Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari is closing on this battle as well. He's only another few tenths behind Perez. DRS will not be activated in these wet conditions on the intermediate tyres. So this battle rages on.
Meanwhile, there's a little problem developing for the Aston Martin team in 5th and 6th places. Lance Stroll's leading Fernando Alonso, but he's falling back against Carlos Sainz, and Alonso's closing in on him. I wonder what they're going to do about that.
Well, meanwhile, what's Sergio Perez is going to do about Nico Hülkenberg? He looks to the left, he looks to the right, into the approach of the downhill right-hander of turn 4, but he still can't find a way through. On the exit, though, Hülkenberg in the Haas gets a little wobble on the front end, and that allows Perez to get alongside and sweep round the outside of the next left-hander. Perez is finally through on Hülkenberg and up into 2nd place.
And the battle further down it for 9th and 10th between Leclerc and Norris is raging as well. They're going side by side into turn 6. Leclerc goes really deep to try and force out Norris, but nearly went straight on into the gravel. He manages to collect it all together, and Norris is right on his bumper through turn 8 as they head towards the last sector, and he's in the spray, ducks out to the outside for the fast downhill turn 9. No way through there. It's just a bit too fast of a corner to really pull off a move.
And while those two do battle, coming out of the final corner now, it really is bringing the Mercedes boys into this fight. Russell and Hamilton both lurking in the background. Down the main straight then, Leclerc defends the inside, Norris follows him, and into turn one they retake the racing line, and it is as it stands. Further up front, Nico Hülkenberg down to third, has now got Carlos Sainz for company. This is the sound on board the Ferrari, up through the gears into the approach of the downhill right-hander of turn four. It's Sainz on the inside, it's Sainz in front of Hülkenberg by the time they get into the braking zone. Sainz up into the top three, Hülkenberg back to where he started in fourth.
As soon as Sainz got the jump out of turn three on the inside for four, Nico had given that one up. He was even sort of not that bothered in the body language of the car and taking off a visor strip instead of really trying to fight him into the braking zone, which is smart driving. He's going to try and conserve this position as much as he can.
Verstappen leads by almost 10 seconds from Perez. Sainz the top three, Hülkenberg, Stroll the top five. Alonso is sixth. Then there's a really nice battle for seventh between Albon, Ocon, Leclerc, Norris, and we're going to include Russell and Hamilton in that as well.
Top Fernando, don't lose too much time in fighting.
And that's the problem we might be having with Aston Martin at the moment. Stroll ahead of his teammate in fifth, and Alonso in sixth, but Alonso catching. Hamilton is 12th in front of Magnussen, Tsunoda, Gasly the top 15, Piastri, De Vries, Sargent, Zhou and Bottas. The 20 drivers all still in this race.
There's going to be an interesting dynamic there at Aston because they are now catching Hülkenberg relatively quickly. The gap is down, so Stroll can justifiably say, look, I'm catching the guys in front, you know, don't attack me. But really, it's more because Hülkenberg is falling back than anything else.
Leclerc has been getting his elbows out all day long so far. If it's not with Norris behind, it's with Ocon in front, and this is the sound of Leclerc, who is now going up through the gears and takes the left-hand side into the approach of the downhill braking of turn four. Ocon in the Alpine on the inside. The red Ferrari is going to try and get an undercut on the blue and pink Alpine. They get side by side. They almost interlock wheels, and that is coming into the left-hander now. Ocon holds on, but can Leclerc get the up and under here and get more traction coming into the left-hander of seven? No, he can't. Ocon places his car in all the right places, holds it for now, and all of that has meant Norris is once again all over the back of the Ferrari driver as we go into the right-hander of turn 9.
I want to ask Jack Aiken a question about that. Esteban Ocon basically parked on the apex at turn 4 to stop Charles Leclerc coming back past him. It worked for him, but you could see Leclerc's annoyance, couldn't you, as he came out of the corner?
Yeah, he tried to. He did quite a good job, but didn't quite manage to fully block Leclerc, and Leclerc still got to the inside and got better traction and was able to try and, you know, pass him through the inside kink on the next corner. So yeah, it's never nice when you're presented with a rear end going nearly 0 miles an hour on the apex, but they just about managed to avoid contact. But it's getting a bit feisty there, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, this battle for... it's actually really the battle for 8th now, which has allowed Alex Albon and the Williams, who's 7th, to really kind of get up the road a little bit. And we're just having another look at this battle between Ocon and Leclerc. Yeah,
so Ocon just goes a little bit too deep to park it on the apex, as they say. Leclerc gives him just a car's width going through that fast kink in towards turn 6, but not enough to fully take the position, and Ocon really commits to sending it late on the brakes into turn 6 and take that position back.
Verstappen still leads from Perez and Sainz, Hülkenberg in 4th, then it's Stroll who rounds out the top 5.
So now I was just going to say, it is getting to that time in the race where you're running out of laps to make a decision on this, because if you want to put slicks on, if you're going to make that time back for about a 20-second pit loss, you have to do it now, and Leclerc's gone wide through the last corner.
He has done, and that has allowed Norris to swoop by and pounce on Leclerc's mistake. The Ferrari tries to find a way down the inside, but he can't make it work. Norris holds on for the time being into turn 1. Norris gets the move done on Leclerc up into 9th. Meanwhile, we just heard from George Russell debating about whether it was time for slicks. Nothing to lose for the Mercedes man. He was well out of the points, and he does come into the pits and changes to the red soft compound of tyre.
It makes sense for them. They're not getting points anyway, so roll the dice. Why not? As long as he can keep the car on track and not damage it for tomorrow's Grand Prix.
That is the main point. Very well made, Aiken. Here we go then. Once again, the Ferrari. This is the sound of Leclerc having a look down the inside of Norris. He's just lost this position. This is the battle over 9th and 10th, and DRS has now been enabled, so this is going to spice things up quite nicely. If you are within a second of the car in front, within the designated zones and the straights on this track, you will be able to open the rear wing flap and get a little bit of extra boost in a straight line. Let's see how it pans out. Can Leclerc try and recover here up into 9th? Currently looking set to score no points. It's only the top 8 that score points in this sprint race as we start lap 17 of 24, and it's now Nico Hülkenberg, a magnificent start in the Haas to get him up into 2nd, falling down through the field. He's currently in 4th, but Lance Stroll in the Aston Martin, with the aid of that DRS, the rear wing flap flies open and then immediately shuts into the braking zone of turn 3, and Hülkenberg loses that spot. He's now down to 5th, Stroll up to 4th. Alonso is next up to pounce on the German.
So Russell now out on those slicks. He's going to be giving the other teams a bit of a barometer for how they're going to perform, and Piastri is joining him on this lap. He's in the pits right now getting those tyres, but and Russell is already setting purple mini sectors, so it's not taking long for those slicks to start working, and it could be a good call.
Out of turn 4 and into 5 very quickly. Norris went quite deep into the right-hander of turn 4, but Leclerc not close enough to try and make any gain on that. It's actually Norris who's much closer to the back of the Alpine of Esteban Ocon in 8th, just half a second between those two. Now, are we about to see a flurry of pit stops? George Russell has come in for the soft compound tyre, the dry tyre, the slick, as has Oscar Piastri, and Nico Hülkenberg in the Haas from 6th has also come in.
It's a very interesting call by the Haas pit crew, because they were obviously in a point-scoring position, very valuable for them, and though he was dropping back, he's not got a lot of laps to make this work. Oh, he gets very close on his pit exit to the crew of the AlphaTauris, and Hamilton's going out as well. The Haas took on new mediums, whereas the Mercedes is on a set of old softs.
It's got to really dry out massively, though, to have any kind of really big difference before the end of this race, do you think?
Look at the track, it's completely dry in some areas now. It's drying up a lot quicker than we expected, and we're now seeing a flurry of cars coming into the pits. We've got Sargent, De Vries, Zhao, Magnussen, they're all in the pits going for those slick tyres, but Hulk is definitely the one with the most to lose. He was the only one in a points-paying position.
Yeah, well, Hülkenberg has come out in 12th in front of Bottas. Hamilton down in 14th in front of his teammate Russell. Magnussen also came in, he's in 16th ahead of Piastri. Sargent, De Vries also just leaving the pits now. This is the sound on board with George Russell in the Mercedes, who streams past his teammate into the braking zone of 4. Russell on the same slick tyres, but with a bit more heat in them, having pitted a lap earlier.
Now, the hard thing for the slick runners, here's Stroll.
Few people putting six on.
Yeah. No, it's into him.
Copy.
Surprising to hear that from Stroll. I mean, it's possibly too late, but here's a Ferrari coming in. As I say that, it's Leclerc who's going for a set of mediums.
Well, Leclerc was technically out of the points, so the big question I was thinking was that battle for 7th. Did any of them want to risk it? And they have. Norris hasn't. He stayed out, but Albon has come in. Leclerc has come in, so that's really shaken that. But Ocon hasn't come in, crucially, as we see a little battle shaping up into turn 1. I think that was the Mercedes of George Russell sweeping past Alex Albon in the Williams.
Now, I was saying before, the hard thing for the slick runners is if they catch anybody and have to try and overtake them off the racing line, which is where the drying track is, and you go onto that wet part of the track, and suddenly you're kind of back to square one of grip again. And we're seeing Hamilton, who's got his tyres up to temperature. He's coming out to these drivers on their outlap. He's passing Leclerc and looking to shape up Albon possibly into turn 4, and he's trying desperately to stay on the very slim piece of dry track, and there's contact. He hits the rear right of Leclerc, who just manages to scoop it up, and Hamilton goes through.
It's not as dramatic as Hamilton and Albon a few years ago, where Albon in the Red Bull speared off into the gravel, but it was enough of a touch to have a little wobble for Leclerc, who loses that position. Hamilton up into 13th, Leclerc down to 14th, and Albon now next up on Hamilton's list for 12th. So this is how it stands. Verstappen leads, Perez, Sainz, Stroll, Alonso, all on intermediates, as is Ocon and Norris. Then comes Hülkenberg, though, who is on the medium compounder tyre, the dry tyre, who has made his way up into 8th and is picking them off off one by one in that Haas. Has just got through on Gasly, who was still on those intermediate tyres. Then comes George Russell in 10th, Bottas 11th. The fight is on for Albon's 12th between himself, Hamilton behind, and Leclerc in 14th. Piastri is 15th. Magnussen, Tsunoda, Sargent, De Vries and Zhou make up the remaining 20 drivers.
Albon just covering the apex of turn 3, but he's gone a little bit too deep, and it's 3 wide on the exit of turn 3 between the Mercedes of Hamilton, Albon, and
it's Bottas. It's Bottas because he's on the intermediate, so that really slowed Albon up. But Albon manages to hold on to the position, but Bottas is down the inside of Lewis Hamilton, who is on the slick tyres, and it's almost 3 wide on the apex of turn 4. Leclerc on the right-hand side of Bottas, and Bottas in a sandwich between Leclerc and Hamilton. They somehow all make it through unscathed. Leclerc, though, getting caught right up behind the Finn who races for the Alfa Romeo team, but he does finally manage to get through into seventh. Piastri now also right behind Bottas, looking to make a move through. So it's Albon 11th in front of Hamilton, Leclerc, and Piastri just about to get through on Bottas.
Russell setting purple lap after purple lap here because he was the first one to go for the slick, and as such he has the most confidence, the most temperature on this tyre, and he's using it to great effect. He's right behind Gasly, and he's just passed him for P9, and he is now 4.5 seconds behind Hülkenberg, who is still getting those mediums up and going, really.
3 laps to go here for the sprint race, and we have drivers that are on intermediate wet tyres and some that are on dry slick tyres. Nico Hülkenberg is the first of those on the slick tyre, the medium compound, and he is catching at a rate of knots, but he's got 9.5 seconds to his next target, Lando Norris for 7th place. Everybody behind is pretty much on the slick tyre, bar Gasly in 10th and Bottas in 15th. That looks like Hamilton has just managed to pick off Albon further down in the field for 11th place. This is the sound of his teammate George Russell up through the gears on the back of the Alpine of Pierre Gasly into the approach of turn 3, and it's a nice and simple move really for Russell, who gets in front by the time they're into the braking zone.
Very easy move. When you factor in that the inters and the wets will have more drag on the straight than a slick tyre, it makes the straight line speed difference even greater, even with that DRS as well. So very easy for him. The Aston Martins are still pounding around there and still in the same order, with Alonso tucked up behind his teammate Stroll. Obviously no team orders as of yet, but it could still be a question when the slick runners catch them.
I don't know about that, Jack. I wonder what's going on here. Is Alonso playing the long game politically within the team by not trying to pass Stroll, given that his dad owns the team? You know, is he thinking it's not worth it for one point in the sprint race when he can get him tomorrow in the Grand Prix when it really counts for the championship? I've got questions about what's happening here. I think Alonso's deliberately not passing him.
This is the sound on board Fernando Alonso as both Aston Martins do a similar line and a bit weaving towards turn 9 just to try and find the wet patches. Battle further back in the pack though. Big lock-up for Leclerc, who nearly finds the back of Albon. Piastri goes through into 12th though, and then it's Albon in 13th and Leclerc in 14th. None of this is over points, it's over pride with just a few races remaining, but I want to add that I've been watching Nico Hülkenberg and how quickly he's been trying to get onto the back of the intermediate run, and Lando Norris in 7th, and he has found well over 5 seconds in about 2 laps. He's only 2.9 seconds behind Norris now for 7th.
He'll easily catch Norris. It's Ocon that's a bit of a question, who's a further second or so up the road. He probably will be able to catch him too. Leclerc now going into turn 1, has a DRS on Albon, goes to the inside, side by side, and it should be a simple move. He's got a bit of wet on his tyres from that inside line, but he keeps everything nice and tidy and makes the move.
Albon, though, will also have DRS behind in the Williams, but it's negated by Leclerc's DRS as well. But can Albon try and find a way through? He has a little tentative look to the inside, a lock-up for the Ferrari in front. Runs a little bit deep, but Albon's not able to pounce as we start the final lap. And Nico Hülkenberg does get through on Lando Norris, who falls down into 8th, coming through the left-hander after turn 5. At the moment, it's Verstappen, Perez, Sainz, Stroll, Alonso the top 5. Ocon is 6th, Hülkenberg, Norris, Russell, Hamilton the top 10. Gasly, Piastri, Leclerc, Albon, Magnussen the top 15. Tsunoda, Sargent, De Vries, Bottas and Zhou, the 20 drivers. But Nico Hülkenberg is not giving up just yet. He's just gone through on Norris. He's already through on the next runner, the Alpine of Esteban Ocon. By the time they get into turn 1, Hülkenberg is making mincemeat of the field and those who are left on the intermediate tyres as the 2 Aston Martins continue to do battle as well. Or is it really battle? If you're Andrew Benson, you don't think it is. Alonso is only 3.5 tenths behind his teammate Lance Stroll. Alonso has the DRS, moves to the outside, coming into turn 4. Will have the outside line, sweeps back to try and cover the inside. Coming through 5 and into 6, it will be Stroll as the inside, but at the end of 24 laps, it is Max Verstappen who is once again on top and takes the sprint race win. Sergio Perez is another 20 seconds before he crosses the line, so we're going to look at this battle all the way to the final corner. Lance Stroll in 4th, Alonso in 5th, but I think the move would have happened by now.
Now that Andrew said that, I wonder if this is a bit of faux playing by Alonso. He's darting all over the place, trying to make a move as they cross the line in those positions. Hülkenberg can't quite get to the back of them, but it looked like he was reserving something, and they're coming to the line. It's a Mercedes of Russell versus Ocon. Oh, that was a photo finish.
It was Ocon in 7th, Russell 9 thousandths of a second across the line in 8th. He almost had him. Ocon was on the intermediate tyre, Russell was on the soft, Norris behind them in 9th, Hamilton in 10th. But it's Verstappen on top in the sprint. It's a Red Bull 1-2 at their home race. Perez in 2nd, Sainz comes home in 3rd, Stroll and Alonso 4th and 5th across the line, Hülkenberg in 6th.
Okay, well done, Max. Well done, mate. That was very well executed. Well done.
Yeah, good race. Just the exit of turn 1, that was not really nice. That could have been a really big shot. So maybe we need to have a chat about that. For me, that was not okay.
Well, Red Bull politics continues to play out in that team, but the grandstands erupts with the orange flares for the Dutch fans who have travelled here for Max Verstappen. The battles were well and truly on in this race, though. Absolutely fantastic. Where did I get to? Hülkenberg was 6th, Ocon 7th, George Russell, the last of the point scorers, in 8th. This is the sound. We're just seeing a replay of Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari. This was him locking up with Piastri coming down his inside, and Piastri managing to get 2 drivers in 1 corner as he made the move on Albon in the Williams as well.
Yeah, that was a brilliant bit of driving by Piastri, combining defence against Leclerc as an offence against Albon, and diving up the inside and just the lightest tap of wheels side by side with Albon, but all got away with it. Now on board with Russell, as we see his attempt to get past Ocon in the last corner. He gets great drive off the last corner, but the finish line just comes a little bit too soon for him. He's already passed Ocon at the start line, but the finish line, of course, is a couple of 100 metres earlier.
Norris was 9th, Hamilton rounded out the top 10, Piastri, Leclerc did get Albon in the end, Magnussen 14th, Gasly 15th, Tsunoda and De Vries 16th and 17th, Sargent, Zhou, Guan Yu and Valtteri Bottas 20th and last, as Max Verstappen makes it back to Parc Fermé and is straight over to congratulate his team. Perez is right there as well, with a little pat on the back, but then straight into a bit of serious talk, and I wonder if Verstappen is probably just saying, well, what was all that lap 1 stuff about?
Yeah, I think both of them were pretty feisty, but it was kicked off by Perez, showing him the edge of the track coming out of turn 1, as Max was saying on the radio. I'm sure that Perez will claim ignorance as a way to diffuse that situation, but I think he knew exactly what he was doing.
I'm going to say, and forgive me if this is bold, that wasn't only one of the best sprints we've had in all the time the sprints have happened, but probably one of the best races this season that we've had in Formula 1.
But was it great because it was a sprint, or was it great because of the conditions?
What's the answer? Well, did the conditions allow for Perez to get a little bit more feisty in turn 1? Would he have done that anyway if it was dry on track? That really brought it up. But then, of course, everyone behind him was struggling, and that allowed Norris to get bunched up, and then Hülkenberg came through. So that is a great question. But either way, that was pure entertainment that I think we all thoroughly enjoyed.
It certainly, I think, affected some of the people's decision to go with a slick. I think we wouldn't have seen as many people jump on a slick with as many laps to go in the Grand Prix, because there was nothing to lose. When you're out of the points, you go for it anyway.
Yeah.
And if you want to get to the top 8, that was kind of the last roll of the dice for most of those midfield runners.
Hülkenberg, I think a great effort from him, who had the most to lose, the highest of those who made a pit stop for the slick tyre. He ended up 6th, and he was pretty close to the back of the 2 Aston Martins anyway. So fantastic effort for him. It's the top 8 that get points, so it's 8 points for Max Verstappen, all the way down to 1 point for George Russell, who steals it at the end from Lando Norris, and in fact nearly stole 7th from Esteban Ocon as well. Meanwhile, down in Park Fermé, the talks continue between the two Red Bull drivers. Looking a bit serious there, but you know, they're not getting fists out just yet.
No, I mean, at the end of the day, you can't press the nuclear button of your teammate not too early in the season. And I think as well, we have to remember as well that Perez still finished 21 seconds behind his teammate in a 24-lap race.
So just a bit of backstory very briefly. We remember Monaco last year when Verstappen thought Perez had crashed deliberately.
Congratulations, a recovery to start that race 5th and then 3rd. Seemed like you really had the pace out there. How much are those upgrades working for you this weekend?
Yeah, tricky conditions out there, especially because it's the first time that we run with the Inter in the whole weekend, so you never know what to expect from the balance, the grip on the track, and to do it in the middle of a race and experimenting in the middle of a race is never easy, but it looked like we had a decent pace. I was struggling a little bit in the high speed at the beginning of the race. Then I managed to to gain a bit of pace back, and I could stay close to Checo, but the Red Bulls were just a bit too quick for us today.
It seemed like you maintained that pressure on Checo for quite a long time during the race, but at the end there, you both were lapping a little bit slower than Max at the front. Did you not have the grip you needed on those inters at the end?
I think they were maybe a bit quicker, but there was a point in the middle of the race when we were passing Hülkenberg that maybe I felt a bit more confidence. Then the track dried up. I degraded a bit my tires, and then I couldn't really stay very close to Checo in dirtier. But it's still a good result, a good day for me today. So we will try and put it together tomorrow again.
Well done. 6 points in the bag, and there's another race tomorrow.
Thank you very much.
Checo, congratulations. 2nd there for today, but it seemed like you managed to get off the line really quickly today.
Yeah, it was a good start. We had a good start and a bit of a fight with Max, ended up losing a position to Nico, which he was very strong in the first few laps, so it was quite hard to get by him.
It seemed like you went quite hard on your teammate there on the run-up to turn 2, and then you felt that he blocked you in turn 3. Can you run us through that a little bit?
Yeah, I think Max was angry that I went into turn 2, but I didn't see him there. I just had a very bad turn 1, so I tried to protect. But once I realized that he was there, I opened up the door and gave the place back into turn 2. And but yeah, it's all fine. We just spoke about it because the visibility, although we were 1 and 2, it was very bad, the visibility out there.
What about the pace during the race? It seemed that after that turn 3 battle, turn 4 with Hülkenberg, you couldn't really seem to close that gap up anymore to Max.
Yeah, I think once I got Nico, it was all about managing the tire to make sure that we made it till the end, because otherwise it would have been really easy to really miss out, and especially with people boxing into the slicks. I think once I went by Nico, it was just bringing it home.
Tomorrow's another day. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Here are totally behind you, but it seems today you were unstoppable once again.
Yeah, the start wasn't ideal, bit of wheel spin, but after that, after lap 1, once we got back in the lead, it was good. I mean, just managing the tires, knowing that if it wasn't going to rain anymore, then 24 laps on an intermediate is quite a lot. But they were hanging in there. I think, of course, the last 5 laps, the slicks were quite a bit faster. But I think for us, like so far in the lead, it didn't make sense to pit, and just we just hang in there with the inters, which worked well.
Well, it seemed today the only obstacles for you were potentially that start and then your teammate on the way up to turn 3. Can you talk us through those 2 incidents?
Yeah, it was a little bit of a hairy moment out of turn 1. And of course, when you get forced onto the grass, it's very slippery, but we managed to keep the car under control, and from there onwards we just did our race again.
Well, you had fantastic pace. That's 8 points in the bag. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Naomi Schiff doing the questioning to the top 3 at the end of the second sprint race of the season, and it is Max Verstappen who is victorious in front of Sergio Perez and Carlos Sainz. But the main points, the big points, are handed out tomorrow for Sunday's Grand Prix, where Max Verstappen will once again start from pole position. That kicks off from 2 o'clock on BBC Radio 5 Live. But my thanks to Andrew Benson, to Jack Aitken for this sprint race coverage. We'll have all the reaction to it on the Checkered Flag podcast, so do make sure you check that out a little later on BBC Sounds and wherever you get your podcasts, and keep up to date with all the latest on the BBC Sports website and app. We shall see you on Sunday for the Grand Prix, 2 o'clock, 5 Live. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.